And change always occurs, but who drives that change? His answer? People with a vision. How, you might be asking or thinking? His answer? Through entrepreneurship. You see, Caleb believes that the purpose of business is to solve problems in a social way. Said slightly differently, money is the tool, not the goal. The challenge, though, according to Caleb, is the debilitating effect of the fear of failure. Caleb found himself facing this challenge soon after completing a master's degree in civil engineering when he mentioned his interest in entrepreneurship to his family and friends. His enthusiasm was met with the all too familiar citation of startup failure rates. He launched his My 40 Days project to, in his words, learn how to be courageous. This project consisted of accepting challenges that people thought couldn't be done and were legal, and documenting the experience via YouTube and a blog. During the project, he discovered, quote unquote, giving yourself permission to fail frees you up to dream. I'm going to repeat that one. Giving yourself permission to fail frees you up to dream. And on the 40th day of the project, one question emerged. The question, what would you do if you could not fail? His answer, move back to Ethiopia from England and start businesses that would have profound social impact. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm FIGT welcome to the stage, Mr. Caleb Meakins.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So good to be here. It's a real honor. It's my first time in Bangkok. One of the things I discovered on arriving was you actually needed a yellow card to get through if you come from what I saw was the big sign saying Africa as I entered the airport. And I've had my yellow card and I've had my yellow fever jabs. And I have a phobia of needles. So you can imagine as I came through the gates and they wouldn't let me through without going back and showing my yellow fever card, which I discovered was with my mum in the UK. And in the UK, it was 5:30 a.m. So I'm vigorously ringing her because my only alternative was to get myself the jab. So I rang my sisters, I rang my mum. They couldn't find it. And so my welcome into Bangkok was a nice jab in the arm. But from that moment forwards, it went up. So I am absolutely privileged to be here. I've loved the city. I want to come back already. I've loved this network. I feel this is such a unique community and a really, really special one. I was in the lightning presentations yesterday, and I was really challenged, moved, inspired, and I just thought this is so unique. And sometimes when you've been a part of something for so long, you can take for granted that you're a part of something very special. And so it's an incredible honor to be here, just even being around you guys, just observing from the sidelines of what you've created here and what you're investing in, and people from all walks of life doing all kinds of things who share this unique commonality around wanting to make a difference. So you can understand I was really excited to be asked to come and speak on a simple topic called changing the world. You can change the world. So I was thinking, oh my goodness, where do I even start with that? But no, it's something I'm particularly passionate about. It's something that I truly believe in. I think it's possible. I think I have a blind optimism to it. And so I'm just going to hopefully unpack that a little bit around some of my thoughts, based on my experiences in the last few years and just my upbringing. And I grew up in Ethiopia and went to an international school. So Phil, some of the stuff you're saying is the first time I've heard language put to it. I've always looked at myself in a way thinking, there's not that many people like me, and we have these reunions every 7 years in Ethiopia or the UK with people that went to our school. But to actually think there's a community that exists that talks about the learnings and the inspirations is hugely profound. So it's actually really special for me to be here. So when we talk about wanting to change the world, you can change the world. It can really feel vague and quite out there. And so my hope is by talking about this, I studied civil engineering, my brain's very logical, it's pragmatic, so I want to kind of bring some earth to it and really to inspire you to appreciate your own experiences and learnings so that you can actually move very practically to say, changing the world. So, like was mentioned, I believe in vision. I think the whole thing of without vision, people won't know where they're going. Without vision, people just... I watched this incredibly funny video on Brexit this morning, and it was this guy trying to climb over a fence, and he was slowly working towards this fence, and as he tries to climb it, he's a bit confused, he's going back and forth, and then suddenly he falls back, and this fence, which is about 100 meters long, falls back on him as well. And I think, I don't know which side of the fence you stand with whether Brexit should happen or not, but one of the things that's very clear is there's a lack of vision as to what it looks like or where is the UK things are going. And you can see the confusion in and amongst society. And so throughout nations, you can see when there's lack of vision, just the confusion that it brings up. So I'm a true believer in vision. And so when we throw out something like you can change the world, what's the vision? What are we working towards? What are we talking about? And I think it can be summed up nicely in human flourishing. Human flourishing. When that term is used, you think, what do you think? You're probably thinking of something right now. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's security. Maybe it's social well-being. Positive emotions, peace, joy. What does human flourishing mean to you? I have my own thoughts. I think it has something to do with aligning ourselves with a purpose, a greater purpose and meaning for why we're here. But as you think about it, you'll have your own thoughts and feelings. But all of us would agree, okay, let's call that the goal of what changing the world looks like. Human flourishing. So as we identify that as that's what we're working towards, and the fact that the very fact you're here means you have an invested interest in wanting to see society flourish, wanting to see various communities that you exist in flourish. And so if we want to work towards that, one very practical way is to identify the challenges that get in the way of human flourishing. So the World Economic did a survey not too long ago around what millennials believe to be some of the global challenges, what they believe to be some of the things that get in the way of human flourishing. And so many of you could probably guess what some of these were. There was a top 10 that they pulled together. Lack of economic opportunity and employment was 10th. People fearful of where jobs will arise from. With artificial intelligence and various developments, there's a deep inner fear in many millennials around where will my job lie? Will my kids find employment if robots can do it? Then safety and security came 14%. Am I safe in my home? Is security good enough? Lack of education. In many parts, so this was 30,000 people were surveyed over 186 countries. And these were some of the things that came up. Food and water security. Government accountability and transparency. I'm in the continent of Africa, and this is a huge thing. Where is the accountability? Some of the biggest challenges are rooted in poor governance, poor leadership. But we're seeing this all over the world, all over Europe, all over the US. And so this lies number 5. Number 6. Number 5, religious conflicts. Number 4, poverty. Who can guess what number 1 is? Number 3, inequality, with 31% believing this to be something they were so afraid of. Large-scale conflict and wars, and we're seeing various attacks going on in increasing measure over the last few months and year. And no wonder many millennials are fearful of this. Who can guess what number 1 is? Can't hear anything. Loneliness. Climate change. Number 1 was climate change and destruction to the nature. So I don't know if any of you have been keeping an eye on the news. London right now or at least for the last few weeks, was on lockdown. People, it was a movement where people were kind of revolting against extinction. And so they had tied themselves to various things in London. And it was a a movement where people signed up to say, I'm okay with being arrested for this. And because they were okay with being arrested for this, they were allocated to certain locations around the city. One location was Oxford Street, where people built a boat and drilled it to the floor and created a concert on Oxford Street. I couldn't believe this was happening right now. But there is a deep fear around where this nation is going. I remember someone was telling me about how kids were striking from school. And when teachers said, get back to school, you need this, they're like, what's the point? We have no future. And so it's interesting, not just millennials, but even the younger generation are incredibly fearful. And so when we paint the picture of human flourishing and we're saying that's where we want to go, we need to be aware that some of the roadblocks and challenges that get in the way of this can be identified here. So how do we go about changing the world? How do we go about playing our part in tackling some of these things? Well, for me, I can only draw upon my own experiences and my own story in trying to identify some things that I believe to be so key to us playing our part, to working towards human flourishing, to working towards fighting some of these challenges that I've identified here. So I'm half Ethiopian, half British. My family, so my dad had gone out to Ethiopia working as a civil engineer. He'd gone out as a student initially. And as he'd gone out there as a student, something about the country caught his heart. So after he graduated, he went back and he was working in water wells and development. He met this beautiful woman working as an accountant there, and he went on to marry her and then had myself and 2 younger sisters. So we grew up in Ethiopia. It was a wonderful upbringing. You can see some of the pictures there. That was our family. And I think I have a lot of fond memories. I went to international school there. I think that was where I was really exposed to the different cultures, dynamics at play. I loved it. I still remember it. And even when now being back, it's really special when I go back to that school. And so that third culture kid, that was me. I really understand it. And then when I was 9 years old, we were planning on going back to the UK for education anyway. But there was, in 1996, an airplane hijacking. And in that hijacking, my dad was on his way to Kenya. And he was killed in that flight. And I know just recently we saw a very similar incident take place. And it just brought back so many memories of that day. It was the same flight line. It was it was Addis Ababa to Nairobi. And so it's all very, very fresh even now as I'm speaking to you. But the aim was we would go back to the UK in the summer, but we moved it forwards a little bit. And so under these unfortunate circumstances, I find myself moving into a new culture, going to the UK where everything is different. Everything is different, from the roads, the airport, the school. I was in a predominantly white school. I was in a predominantly middle-class society. And so I felt very different. And I think there's always that crossroad where you can feel like an outsider or feel that you're different in a positive way. And I definitely, for the first 10 years, felt the negative way about that. I was different. I didn't necessarily look the same. In fact, when I first came, people they said this to me. They were expecting a little kid with dreadlocks. And so when they saw me, it was like, you don't look Ethiopian. And I would say, what do you mean I don't look Ethiopian? Well, you don't look Ethiopian. And I was like, well, what does an Ethiopian look like? And they had their own visuals and imageries, and probably very much influenced by Band-Aid and a whole lot of other influences. So as I arrived, not only were they shocked by what I looked like, but they were also shocked by my experiences. And this was posed through questions like, so you ran around with giraffes and zebras? And I was like, I think I'm just going to say yes. Yes. And so from the get-go, there was this instant sense of, I am different, and I'm going to have to embrace that. And I'm just going to have to go with that. And so I went along for the majority of my youth feeling very different. But that difference didn't always pose itself in a negative way. I realized I saw the world differently. I felt like I saw the world could be done differently. And as that happened, I always thought differently. And so I always challenged the status quo. So my mom's Ethiopian, so I only had two options for what I would go on to study at university. It was either be a doctor or an engineer. She's like, I came all this way for your education. You're not going to go on and do something else. And I had a deep love for media. I love making films and videos, so I wanted to go and do media, but my mom was like, what is media? I was like, Mom, come on. And so I was afraid of blood, so I couldn't be a doctor, as I mentioned with the injection on arrival. So engineering was my only option. So I went to Loughborough University, which was a specialist in civil engineering in the UK. And it was one of those where you have to choose either a bachelor or a master's from the get-go. So I committed to a master's degree with a year in industry. So the biggest lesson I learned over that 5 years was I do not want to be a civil engineer. And I have a very wonderful degree to say, I've done it. Thank you, Mom. I'm now moving on. And so I realized actually my experience of growing up in Ethiopia that I had thought to be a negative one really planted a seed in me where I always challenged the status quo, where I always challenged the norm. And I think one of the biggest lessons if we are to change the world is an initial awareness that we see the world differently. And because we see the world differently and we've had different experiences, that theory is actually rooted in experience. If it can be done differently, it can be done better, right? And so if it can be done better, you are fully equipped to play a role in things becoming better. So there's many differences. In Ethiopia, growing up in Ethiopia, I see community is a huge thing. Family is a huge thing. So let alone Christmas and special occasions, we were always around families' houses. Always. And then I came to the UK and we lived next door to my auntie and my uncle. And we were only allowed to go around on Christmas Day. I exaggerate a little bit, but it was very much like that. It wasn't we just knock and come in, we just uninvited, eat all the food and open the fridge. It wasn't that anymore. And so I saw something very positive about an Ethiopian culture that valued family over everything else. And I saw something of a room for improvement within UK society. The idea of sending your elderly into an old people's home was the most horrific thing in Ethiopia. Yet in the UK, it's a countdown. And waiting for when you do that. And so you realize, no, there is something rich that we need to take from this culture. But then I go back to Ethiopia and I get ready to queue up at the bank. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been waiting here and you think it's okay to do that? And so I suddenly realized, I don't like this about this, and I don't like this about this. And in the UK culture, there's something truly special around the way the legal system holds certain things to account. There's something beautiful around, there's various beautiful things within the UK culture. There's various beautiful things within the Ethiopian culture. And so actually, by experiencing something different, I know things can be better. And so as people who have lived in different cultures, you need to be aware that you are equipped more than others to make a difference. And so first thing I would say is you need a belief that things can be better when it comes to wanting to change the world. You're equipped in many ways. One is that awareness and experience, but you're also equipped through that ability to communicate. As we painted some of these global challenges, you'll be aware that so many are related to cross-border interaction. So just that ability to understand cultural nuances is so huge. And so you shouldn't underestimate that. You shouldn't undervalue that in any stretch of the imagination. And then the very hard skill of just having an ability, many of you, of speaking other languages, you shouldn't take that for granted. So when we talk about how, there is a deep belief that things can be better. So this seed of things can be better, things can be done differently, allowed me to go, you know what, I studied civil engineering, but I don't need to go on and be a civil engineer. which was such an alien concept for so many people. You studied something, so you do it. How dare you do anything else? It makes no sense. But I was like, no, I don't like it. And because I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. And because I'm looking at the trajectory of many of my seniors, I see no one I want to aspire to be like. So several filters are telling me this is not for me. And you can imagine how hard that is to tell your Ethiopian mom who moved to the UK for your education. But she gracefully said, I'll give you 6 months to make an income. If you don't, you got to be an engineer. And I said, give me 6 months, Mom. I'll figure this out. So I'm at university. I'm like, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to set up businesses. I've discovered along the way, I couldn't put language to it, but I know I'm good at coming up with ideas and then drawing a team together to bring those ideas to life. And I discovered that is a trait of an entrepreneur. So I decide that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up businesses. And the moment you come to tell people that's what I'm going to do, the pessimism that drops over their faces is remarkable. I don't think they know they do it. But the pessimism that follows is truly remarkable and incredibly demoralizing as well. The other thing is just this deep sense of, whoa, like, it is going to be difficult. It is going to be hard. It is a road less traveled. So I realized that actually, if I was to go down this route, I was going to have to challenge one of the biggest things that was going to get in the way, which is fear of failure. Failure was going to prevent me. Or not failure itself, but the fear of it. So Lent was approaching. I just graduated. I said, okay, I need to combat this. I need to grow. Things can be better. So then I decided to launch a project that I called My 40 Days. I was inspired by someone that did 100 days of rejection in the US. And I thought I could take a twist of this and over a 40-day period in the UK, throw myself into the deep end of just getting rejected 40 times. But I'm going to make this unique by creating a social project around it. So I'm going to do hidden camera stuff. I'm going to write about the blogs, and I'm going to go out and inspire others as well as inspiring myself. Plus, no one would believe I did this if I didn't film it. So I created a Facebook page, which is the great way to start anything. Man, I look so young. And just called it My 40 Days. And so as soon as I created it, the challenges started coming in. And that's when I realized I need some guidelines because I'm not getting arrested or thrown in prison for anybody's inspiration. So I said, it has to be challenging, it has to be entertaining, and it has to be legal. If it fits those three things, then I'll consider doing it. So the challenges came in thick and fast. So day one was go out into the streets and ask strangers for £100. Now, I don't know if you heard me. To go out into the streets and ask strangers for £100. So I thought, okay, well, if there's anywhere in London that's going to do it, it's South Kensington. South Kensington is notorious for people with a lot of cash. So I go on the streets and I'm like, hey, and people just walk by and I just said, look, can I borrow some money? And they're like, how much? They're like, £100? What? Get away from me. Others were like, what will you do with it? And I was like, I'm not sure yet. They're like, I hadn't thought that far ahead. And that opened some deeper conversations. I remember some Russian mogul was just like, well, I'll invest if you tell me more about this idea. And I was like, I wish I had an idea. That was day one, but I very quickly realized, despite knowing that probably I won't get any money given to me, the rejection still kind of affected me. And so the challenges came in. They took light-hearted approaches and more serious ones. One was go to a fast food chain and get them to cook your raw chicken. And I thought, who comes up with this stuff? So I go to McDonald's with this 2-kilo naked raw chicken, and within minutes, the place was around this chicken. The staff were confused. I was confused. Customers were confused. And they basically said, what do you want us to do with that? I was like, could you cook me a chicken? They're like, we don't do that here. They're like, why don't you go to Nando's, which is famous for chicken? And I thought, okay, I'll try KFC first. So I go to KFC, and you should be worried. It was as if they'd never seen a chicken before. I walked in, And she was shocked. She's like, I'm calling the police. I'm calling the police. And I was like, I'm going. And so I left there very dejected and rejected. So they took light-hearted approaches, but they took also more serious ones as well. So you know when you have a crush on someone or you're interested in someone, that fear that just fills you. Just me? There's a fear that fills you because it's high stakes. And I realized that's something that was always getting in the way of me ever making any forward movements towards anyone I was interested in. And so I realized, okay, I want to actually overcome this fear. So when a challenge came in to say, go to Carnaby Street and profess your love to women on the streets, I was like, I have to do it. I have to do this. So I go to Carnaby Street and I'm like, how do you even begin this? So as these women walk past, I just say, hey, do you believe in love? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, do you believe I've fallen in love? She's like, with who? I was like, with you. She's like, go away. Others were like, do you believe in love at first sight? And so confused. But what happened that day was the level of my confidence grew so much. So much that I was able to actually ask out the girl I fancied at the time. Yeah. Well, on hindsight, I wish I hadn't. So your clapping is premature. But actually, I grew so much. So these challenges took. I hope it's live streaming, right? Oh my goodness! Nah, she wasn't you. It was someone else. All right. Okay. Moving on rapidly. Okay, that threw me off. So some of these challenges take on light-hearted approaches and more serious ones, but all the way through the project, I found I was growing. I'll tell you about one more. So I was told to go into a mall and actually convince them that I was famous. And I just thought, who do I look like that's famous? And I was trying to think, Brad Pitt, and my sister was like, no, you look like one of the werewolves from Twilight. I was like, I've never seen that, but fair enough, let's give it a go. So we go to this shopping mall in London, and I'm like, how do I convince people? And I managed to convince a bunch of young girls to go around screaming and spreading the word that one of the werewolves is here, one of the werewolves from Twilight is here. And they agreed to it because they thought it might be funny, and it was still hidden camera stuff. And then I thought, I'll have some guys taking photos so it looks like paparazzi. So we go, we do this, I tell you no lie. Within 15 minutes, the mall had allocated security to us. These girls were I don't know what came over them. Mums were asking me to take pictures with their daughters. It was just remarkable. And so afterwards, we go on social media to just be like, okay, what went down today? And I find this photo, which kind of summed up the day for me. And it was this girl who posted a picture, and she's like, look who I just met, #Twilight. And her friend goes on to say, who is it? Don't know his name, he's a werewolf in Twilight. The other one's like, nice. Who is he? I can't remember his name. Okay, aha. So I realized, like, I'm trying to fail, and sometimes I succeed, and in other times I fail miserably, but I'm growing all the same. Like I said, people wouldn't believe me unless I actually film this stuff. So I have actually one of the videos I'd like to show you just to give you a feel of what some of these are like. So let's play the video. Are you into storytelling? We should exchange stories for songs. We should exchange your songs for my storytelling. Do you? I believe we live in an age today where those that can hold people's attention with storytelling win the game. And so today we're here in Fulham, and I have to hold strangers' attention by telling them a creative story. When they saw each other, they did not know what they were going to do. Yeah. They literally had seen each other twice before. Yeah. But this time, They just didn't know what to do. I'm a rush. Oh, you? I was about to say a real crazy story. Sarah, at 14 years old, had left home. She'd been through a lot in her time. She'd grown up in East London. They used to sit and drink tea to pass the time. So they used to sit and drink tea to pass the time. But suddenly, when Sandra was no longer around, putting down any fire. Sports shops. Yeah, there's a Chelsea store at Stamford Bridge. Okay. I was in the middle of telling her a story. You can join in. So, okay. Right there in that moment, they did not know what was going on. Yeah. But my legs hurt, she said. My legs hurt. What am I talking about? Well, you can find out. I'm getting to whoa! And he said, listen, we're gonna be okay. And I had to go. Hey, your face. Every time I look at you, you are creative storytelling. Creative storyteller. You just make up the story on the spot. Well, that's part of the part. Yeah, it's your story you just told. Yeah. What made you write the stories?
Girls on Tinder, but
No way. That's creativity. You know?
what do you mean know what's happening? I'm telling you a great story.
To West London. Yeah. But the love in our heart she couldn't make up.
Hi.
What do you think?
That's great.
It's a story of love, it's a story of adventure. Yeah? Great storytelling. Yeah. I'm trying to get better. It's hard to hold people's attention, but this is life. So this project just opened my eyes to this ability to grow as I stepped out of my comfort zone. And one of the biggest lessons actually that I learned was when we talk about the fear of failure, one significant thing that we're talking about is actually the fear of what other people think. So this was discovered on probably one of the easiest challenges on paper, but one of the hardest ones I tried to do. So it was to lie down in a public place. And I just thought, this is easy. And then they said it's at Waterloo Station, one of the busiest stations in London. And I thought, not so easy, but easier than other things. And so I turn up at this station and I go to lie down. And something in me just wouldn't let me. And I don't know what it was. And I just said, too easy, let's just go. And he's like, no, you have to do this challenge. And I was like, and I was really surprised by what it was about this that I couldn't do. And so I eventually pluck up the courage and I lie down. And I think one of the things I was afraid of was people would think I collapsed or I tripped up. Anyway, I lie down for a couple minutes and then I get up and I just feel this liberating feeling come over me. Do you know what? Not one person stopped to ask if I was all right. But what I discovered was actually the heart of fear of failure is actually the fear of what people think. And actually, we make life decisions based off of what other people think. And we allow what people we may never see again to dictate some of the decisions that we make. And actually, most of the time, they don't care. They do not care. And so, if we want to be able to do remarkable things, if we want to work towards human flourishing, if we want to take on some of the biggest global challenges, we're going to have to engage and fight with the fear of failure, which ultimately means fighting the fear of what other people think. So that was a huge, huge discovery for me. But along the way, I also realized, I thought, at the end of this project, I'm going to be fearless. I'm going to be like a rock. My spirit, my soul is just going to be firm. But what I realized was, as I did each challenge, I got more fearful as they got harder and harder. And I really discovered, actually, the aim of this isn't to become numb to fear. Brené Brown talks about this. If you numb one emotion, you numb all emotions. And so the aim isn't to numb this feeling of fear. Actually, it's to learn how to overcome it. And so I found myself picking up some tools that were game-changing for me. So first one was, as I approached the challenge, to overcome it, all you need is 3 seconds of insane courage. 3 seconds of insane courage. I'm afraid of heights. If you want to do bungee jump, it's just you go at 3, 2, 1. You can psych yourself up for 3 seconds. Maybe not a minute, maybe not even 30 seconds, but everybody can psych themselves up enough for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of insane courage is all you need to do anything. The second is to ask, what is the worst that could happen? In some of these, it was very scary, but it never was going to end in death or getting arrested because of the boundaries that I drew. And so actually, when you ask this question, if it's neither of those two, then you're probably okay to give it a go. So ask yourself, that Dr. Pepper ad, what is the worst that could happen? Third is to visualize success. Actually, if the goal is big enough and great enough and worth chasing, then that should outweigh that fear of failure. So really assess, is this worth chasing? If you're going to let fear of failure stop you from getting there. And as you visualize the feeling, the sense of what achieving it feels like and looks like, you'll find yourself increasing in motivation. For me, praying my socks off helped me like you wouldn't believe. And so I add that, I say that. When I pray, I believe there is a God that listens and gives strength. And so for me, prayer has been a huge, huge one. To pray in situations where I think I'm going to pass out and die, some supernatural courage seems to fill me deep within. And then make it a habit. It's proven that as you step out your comfort zone, your comfort zone grows with you. And so actually, it's not just about a one-time thing. It's about a habit of doing this. And to take it from theory to practice. When I talk about fear of failure, often I say, in a big room, I say, okay, this is theory. Let me give you a taste of what practice is. I want one person to just stand up and sing. And suddenly the room is filled with fear. And I'm not going to ask that to happen now or here. There's a few people ready to stand. This usually means that you're good at singing and this is not a fear of yours. That's what I found in some places. Someone will stand up and they have the most glorious voice and you're like, you do this all the time. So actually, one of the other challenges I give is to lie down in a public place. To actually engage with the practice of this and to go somewhere and to lie down in a public place. Then it really taps into that. So make it a habit. So don't let the fear of failure stop you. So we're saying, believe things can be better. Don't let the fear of failure stop you. And so because of this project, I found myself being given platforms to speak on the fear of failure. And whenever I would go somewhere, I would open with a particular line. But the funny thing is, after you speak in a few places, you suddenly get tainted as the expert in failure, which I'm not sure I'm proud to take that title of, because who wants to be a massive failure, right? So I was invited to do a talk at a TEDx event. And after I did this talk, I found suddenly everyone thinks you're an expert in that thing. And so I found myself going and speaking in places, and I would open with this question. What would you do if you could not fail? This was a very, very significant question because it taps in to your deepest desires. It taps into your deepest wiring. What would you do if you could not fail? I really want you to engage with that question. What would you do if you could not fail? My answer to that was I would go out to Ethiopia. I would go out to Ethiopia and I would set up businesses that employ many, many people. Businesses that added value to society, that solved some of the biggest social needs, some of the biggest economic needs. And so 3 years ago, I moved out to Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is a remarkable place. I don't know how much you've paid attention to the news. I don't think it's reported enough. We're having incredible political reforms right now. A new prime minister that really understands what it looks like to lead well with great vision. Who knows that most African leaders don't leave because their term is up. They leave because they're either a coup or they die. First thing he does, adds a term limit. And he says, when my time is up, my time is up. Next, he begins reforming just how things are done. The bureaucracy, the sense of slowness, and he begins to change. And so it's an exciting, exciting place. And so I say, I'm going to go out there and I want to learn and I want to grow and I want to make a difference. And so I go and I first work for a VC fund just to understand the landscape, a VC fund based in Kenya looking to invest in Ethiopia. I learn about business and what's going on there. I then move into a company that's building the first waste-to-energy plant in Africa. So a 50-megawatt power plant looking to take 90% of the city's waste and transform it to provide 35% of household energy needs. And so I learn about what it looks like not just to have big vision in a country like Ethiopia, but to bring it to life. After a year being there, I realized, actually, okay, I think it's time for me to try and do my own thing. And I see this really beautiful space, and I say, the coffee industry, that's what I want to be in. I researched the farm side and the supply chain side, and I realized there is a hole in the market and an opportunity to create a coffee shop that does things incredibly well, that can compete with international standards, that can employ many people. And so we set up Bacon Brew as a way of doing that. And so Bacon Brew, the dream was for it to be a hub of creativity, a space where ideas can be birthed, where things can flourish. So we employ 25 people, we run creative events, we're trying to put a real value on homemade. Who knows coffee was born in Ethiopia? Yeah, come on, you know your coffee. That's a huge thing for me. And so in just going out there, I'm learning some valuable lessons around creating change and what difference that makes in the lives of individuals. I had no background in food and beverage. I had no background in energy. But in just taking steps, you realize doors open. By not just allowing, they say, vision without action is hallucination, right? Vision without action is hallucination. We can talk theory until the cows come home. But actually, if we don't do something, nothing will change. And so we realize that unemployment and entrepreneurship is hugely underdeveloped and underserved in Ethiopia. So we set up a network called Mela, where we bring together industry leaders to share their experience. Who knows that if you've not seen a blueprint or a roadmap, it's very difficult to figure out how to get to your destination. I first was interested in entrepreneurship when I hear the story of Richard Branson, when I hear the story of Lord Sugar, or people in the UK who did it, who started with very little and end up absolutely killing it. Whereas in Ethiopia, up until 91, it was a communist regime. It wasn't okay to stick your head above the parapet. So you have a generation who had no role models. So we create this platform to tell the stories of these individuals. And we're very honest and open at the start. Be real. Don't just talk about the glamorousness of your setup, but how hard it was to get to where you were, your failures, your struggles, your difficulties. And so this network has grown from 20 to 150 on a regular basis. And we're funded by the Dutch government who supported us get to where we are. And it's growing, and they're now saying, would you expand this across the continent? Would you look at ways where we could do this in Uganda and Tanzania and other nations? I have no background in development. I have no background in this stuff. It's just do something. Do something is a motto that has been stuck in my head from that challenging of status quo days. The same seed that is in you if you've lived cross-culturally. That things can be different, things can be better. So create is what we're trying to do. So we do acoustic nights and live music nights. There's nothing that we believe we can't do. We got to challenge the status quo. We got to do creative things. We just launched the first ever IPA in Ethiopia, which, yeah, I'm real proud of. So a pale ale, and it's brewed with a guy who's one of the top 10 in the world, who happens to be in Ethiopia for a little bit of time. And so he's running unbelievable global business, but finds himself in Ethiopia, and we say, let's create this one-of-a-kind IPA. People come, we give it to them for free, they taste it, they love it, and then within a week, the US Embassy's ordered 600 liters worth of it. We're like, can we deliver that? He's like, yeah, no problem, no problem. So that's in the brewery right now, being developed. We create media content, and this media content has been fun to do. That YouTube, My 40 Days, developed into a channel that actually now promotes Ethiopian culture. The My 40 Days videos were getting 10, 15,000 views on the low end of what YouTubers do. And then I did one video on Ethiopian culture, and that exceeded 1 million views, and I suddenly went, oh, there's a market over here. I'm no longer the expert in failure. I'm going to talk about Ethiopia now, because The audience wants it. So we started creating these contents on Ethiopia and the richness of the culture. And I tell you all this stuff to be like, when you just step out and do one thing, it opens a door to do more things. And as you do more things, the impact you have begins to increase. And so through this, we now have Ethiopian Airlines as a big client, and we're creating content for Ethiopian Airlines, and it's been so much fun to do. And so Ethiopia, for me, has just been this unbelievable adventure and journey of growing this media company and also this coffee shop restaurant chain out in a country where people would say, you should never go there because nothing is possible there. So step out and do something. Do something. Do you know what the difference is between something happening and not happening? Doing something. It's actually crazy. It's actually profound. Just doing something takes it from nothing happening to something happening. I couldn't believe it. So I don't underplay this final point. So to summarize, believe things can be different. Don't let the fear of failure stop you, and step out and do something. Global challenges need global solutions from globally minded people. You can change the world. You will change the world. Thank you very much.